And we have these twins. Cooper is returned from his mission in South Africa, and like I said, is playing volleyball at BYU. And Riley, Cooper's twin, has transitioned and is now Riley, my daughter. And she's beautiful, and I love her. I love her with all my heart. And that's been a journey. That's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and say, I love her and everything's hunky-dory. It's hard. It's hard because you see pain, because our society is not kind in general to the LGBTQ community. Well, guess what? I am now. I am. And my wife is. And the rest of everyone should be.
Okay, so welcome back to Case Studies. I'm with what I would consider now a dear friend.
That's so nice.
But a new friend.
That's right.
And my story about Dix Jarman, which is like a really, like when you take this podcast and case study, I think your life and my experience with your life is a case study of integrity and a case study of reputation. And this was my personal experience with Dix. Was I have friends who I admire at a very high level. John Tenney, Ty Mattingly, Kevin Santiago, all of these guys that I, really look up to, care about. They're important partners in my life. And all of them at different times have said, you need to meet Dix. Like he would be a great investor. He loves golf. And there's been 2 or 3 different times where your name has come up. And I remember meeting you. We met at Riverside, and it was the first time where we actually met. And the words just came out of my mouth. I just said, your reputation precedes you. Like You
did. That's what you said.
I've got too many people that I care about that think really highly of you. And it's crazy how quickly you can develop trust because of that. And the opposite's true. Yeah. Like your reputation... If you
that same information could have had you just shake my hand and go the other way.
For sure. And so it was, that was kind of the first lesson for me was, wow, this is like a real life experience of when you live a life of integrity, that your reputation truly does precede you. Got on to get to know each other, and it's been really fun for me to hear your story. So I'm really excited to have you here today.
Well, I'm grateful to be here, happy to be here. And the relationship, like you said, it's kind of new, but it feels old.
Yeah.
It feels mature. It feels deep. And when we met that first time at Riverside, you recall I said the same thing. Your reputation preceded you, and all those same people had told me about you. And it was like, why had we not?
Yeah.
Like, it's their fault that they didn't just force us to meet. We could have got a 10-year head start on this.
So I love founder stories. Like they just light me up. The founder's journey and the entrepreneurial journey. And what I've found is usually the story is way different than the perceived view of what the story is. And as I have got to know your story, you have a phenomenal story. So I want to jump into this journey of entrepreneurship, but maybe go back to like where it all started. Talk to me about your parents, like kind of how did you grow up?
Wow, I didn't know we were going there. My parents are the greatest. I mean, I'm sure everyone, or lots of people, especially people I've heard on your podcast, and I know some of their parents and their families. I feel like my childhood was just perfect. I don't know, we never wanted for anything, but we weren't wealthy. I think we actually had money, and my parents were really good at making sure we didn't know that.
So what did your folks do?
My dad was the vice president of APS, which is the public utility in Arizona. Okay. I mean, he's one of the top executives in the state of Arizona.
Okay.
Flying around, building power plants in Four Corners, Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station. And I'm, just this kid at school. And I'll never forget when I was a little kid, I would tell teachers that asked, what's your dad do? And what I remembered, and I'm talking little, he's an engineer. I thought he drove a train.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of engineer. He's a mechanical and electrical engineer, not driving a train with a blue hat.
And he was the president of
Vice
that
president,
company. Okay.
But he was over construction and engineering. So the president of a utility is more of a political almost position. There's so much,
So
with
his
the
skills,
utility
his skills were way more technical.
Yeah, he got an electrical engineering degree from the University of Utah. So he went to the U while my mom was a cheerleader at BYU, and they met and dated and were married. And then my dad went back when I was a little kid. I remember being about 5 or 6, and he went back to Michigan for a summer program with his electrical engineering degree. He could double up and get a mechanical engineering degree with one summer of just all in. So we missed him for a whole summer. And then he came back, and that effort put him in a position where this job became, and he worked the rest of his career in that position.
Yeah, and your mom, homemaker? Was she?
Yeah, my mom was just home. She was home you come in the door from school, and hi, Mom. Every day from kindergarten through the end of high school. She's the Little League team mom. She's at every game I ever played. I mean, I thought I was going to be a professional athlete in, 5 different sports maybe. Yeah. I was just going to pick which one.
But you're actually a phenomenal athlete.
But that, of course, didn't happen. But my mom was just the greatest sport. So my parents both passed away right here in Salt Lake, both when they were 84, but 2 years apart. So my mom 2 years ago and my dad, my mom 3 years ago and my dad 6 years ago.
But as far as like a foundation, you had like a solid upbringing, brothers, sisters.
Absolutely. My sister's the oldest, then 3 boys. We're all still very close. Couldn't like I said, I couldn't pick a better family situation.
And then you moved to BYU when?
So I went to BYU, graduated from high school, knew I was going to wait a year to go on my mission. So I came to BYU in 83, 82. I graduated in 82, so crossed over that semester and got my mission call in the spring when I was at school. That's a funny story. My mom had this premonition that I was going to serve in England. So my name, we didn't cover that. My name, Dix, is a very interesting name, and I'm really proud of it because it was my grandfather's name, my mom's dad, Grandpa Dix, and I'm now Grandpa Dix, so we'll get there. But growing up, that name was, you get through high school with an interesting name like that, you develop pretty thick skin.
Yeah, of course.
But I've had this running joke, and I'm telling all the people in your organization, all your podcast listeners, anybody finds somebody with my first name, the rules are they have to know them personally, like know of them. Can't be just a Google search. And contacts me. There's a significant reward.
Well, what do we got?
Because no one has ever found anyone with my given name. And my name was Dix because my grandpa was Dix. He was born in St. George, and of course, St. George was called in the old church days just called Dixie. And of course, that's why the college is called Dixie. I don't know if you know the reason for that is when the church grew up in the Midwest, south was Dixie.
Yeah.
And what is south of Salt Lake?
Fascinating.
St. George.
No, I didn't know
So it was just called Dixie.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
My grandpa was named Dixie. He didn't like the IE sound of it, so he changed it to just Dix, and that's my name. So
it's incredible.
I grew up with kind of a little chip on my shoulder, maybe.
So moved down to Utah County.
Yep. Went to BYU.
Go to BYU. You were a golfer.
Yeah. So I was a golfer. I was a good high school player, very good high school player, because everyone that can play in college is a very good high school player.
Yep.
Thought I was going to play on tour and all that. Luckily, I came up here and saw how good the BYU team was. I was just happy to be on the team. I think I told you in Montana, there's nothing better than being a bench warmer on the BYU golf team in 1985 because it just means you're a member at Riverside.
Yeah.
There's no weight room or calisthenics or coach yelling at you. You're just a member at Riverside. So Bruce Brockbank was one of my teammates, who's the coach now, and he jokes because we have a family foundation scholarship, a perpetual scholarship on the golf team, and Bruce claims I'm the largest financial contributing former member who never made a match. That's a long title. So I played golf at BYU. It was so fun. The guys are all still friends of mine, but like I said, I never literally made a match.
Yeah.
The non-traveling member of the team, if you call it that. To
make the golf team at BYU is like so hard.
Yeah.
And today, I don't know if it was harder then than it is today, but today it feels like it's almost impossible.
It's harder today because remember, today you're pulling golfers from all over this planet.
Yeah.
Instead of just, the 5 states close to Utah, maybe, which is where Coach Tucker was probably recruiting from. Although we had a kid on our team from Columbia. The church always gives BYU a great recruiting base, right?
Yep.
So we had a kid from Columbia, Eduardo Herrera, phenomenal player, and then a couple of kids from Canada. Brent Franklin, I remember, was probably one of the best college players of his time, and he's from Canada. So we had a good
team,
good group of guys. A guy from Japan. So as BYU always pulls from the whole world.
So go to BYU, and then mission was like super important to you.
Yeah, always knew I was going to serve a mission. I mean, I guess like a lot of people, that's just we grew up. My dad served in the Central States mission, and my grandpa served in England. Oh, and back to that story. So I get my mission call at BYU while I'm a freshman in the fall. We didn't do big parties where you invited everybody over and live streamed it, right? I just opened the mail. And I called my mom. She had told me she had this like temple kind of premonition. You're going to England, like Grandpa Dix did. And I called her and said, Mom, I got good news and bad news. The bad news is I'm not going to England. The good news is I am going to Europe. She's like, oh, what mission? I said, Peru. She said, do they teach geography at BYU? I got it confused with Portugal.
You 100%
I just
thought.
read the thing
That's
and I got it confused with Portugal. So I didn't go to Europe. I went to South America.
That is amazing.
And it was awesome.
So to go to Peru, and when we were golfing, you told me this story where you had a leader on that mission. You had a mission president that like really impacted your life.
Yeah.
Like, and a lot of it was he kind of saw you bigger than maybe you saw yourself in that moment. It was really pivotal. Talk to me about that.
It was. I told you in the vein that it was also a little bit of a eye-opening, kind of a double-edged sword. He called me to come and move to Lima from Chimbote, which is up north, and work in the office as his assistant, which was kind of an honor, in the mission. I don't know that that's valid, but it seemed like that was kind of a big deal. My missionary companion was twice the missionary. He's the greatest missionary the church has ever seen. I felt like Elder Chamberlain. And I remember saying to the president on the phone, President, you're picking the wrong guy. My companion's so much. And he said, Elder Jarman, I need you in here because you can sell snow to an Eskimo. And when you think about that comment or compliment in the terms of a missionary, it kind of made me think a little bit. It's like, wait, I don't want to be selling this gospel message, right? I want to share it. And I hope I did that with integrity. But I think he recognized in me that I could.
Yeah.
And I knew I would end up in some way or another in sales and in my business. That's all it is.
And we actually talked about that. Sales has all sorts of different, connotations to different people. But like for me, like I don't know if he could have given you a greater compliment. Because he's literally telling you that you can persuade and that you can get people to move and you can influence some people. And that's ultimately like why he was bringing you in, was he needed stuff done and you could go get it done. You could get kind of the
troops going.
The message. And we'll get to this, but like talk to me, and we're bouncing around, but talk to me about how important your business sales was in your business, and even is today. Like this is my experience. We're golfing in Montana. You've sold your company. You're completely out. There's a guy that has a contract that could be attractive, and I've been on a thread with you following up with him 3 times to go get that contract. So it's obviously like in your bones,
right?
Like the
thanks
hunt,
for that connection, by the way.
Yeah, the hunt to go get revenue. But talk to me about that, like sales and how important sales was.
Learning your background and having a son that did summer sales, I believe that whole real process and principle grew up right here in Utah Valley, right? I mean, we set the bar anyway, and at the end of the day, our business is just sales. So a little different. We don't do any cold calling. And to be very honest, that I was okay with that. I didn't really want to go knock the doors, right?
Yep.
But I wanted to be in front of the customer. Luckily in our business, the inquiry always comes from the customer because it's an expensive product, right? So we're in your home at your invitation.
Got it.
And that's where I felt like I shined.
Yeah.
And it's usually with the misses because the men aren't making the design decisions in the home, right?
Yeah.
So that was the whole job.
That
and
was
I think
your
I told you, we sell, we didn't cover that really, but my company, Sunburst Shutters, we have offices all over the country. I rolled up and sold my group of those companies, but there are other right here in Linden, Sunburst Shutters, Utah, run by one of my best friends and partner's son, is a separate entity. So it wasn't part of that transaction. It's like a licensee.
Okay.
But the business is still sales. It's all sales. And I think I told you when we were playing golf that, to me, it was just a widget. And I'm being serious. I didn't know the first thing about window coverings or design. If my wife were here, she would tell you exactly how little I know about anything related to design. I usually have to kind of wake her up and ask her if this shirt goes with these pants. I have no clue. But to me, Casey, it was just a widget. And we did it the best. We made the best shutters anywhere. And so it was a prideful thing to be able to sell it. But there's lots of competition. And so at the end of the day, it's that meeting, me sitting here across from your wife, telling her why Sunburst Shutters is who she needs to use. And she's getting 4 bids, and we're going to win. We're going to win every time.
It's just the conviction.
Yeah. I told my wife when we moved to Vegas to open the Sunburst Shutters division there, I said, sweetheart, I don't know anything about shutters, but this is sales, and I know sales. We'll do this for 5 years and learn everything we can about running a small business, and then we'll go do something I like. Well, 37 years later, it's because it didn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the game of business, and that was the widget, and all I cared about was that it's the best widget available, and that every transaction we had with a customer was honest. I think the thing I'm the most proud of is 37 years later, you could not find, and I challenge if you wanted to, through all the annals of our history and customers and databases, you couldn't find one customer, not one, that would say, you know, after a couple of months, I'd rather have my money back and you take your shutters. Not one. And that means a lot to me. I wasn't selling encyclopedias, so to speak, that they might not have needed 2 weeks later. And that meant a lot to me. And I think I told you that integrity of the business was so important to me because I think I'm wired in a way that if I were an attorney or in some other field, I don't know. I hope not, but I think I could have bent the rules because the goal was so important to me. But in my business, I told you this on the golf course, I was so grateful that it was a business you could be perfectly honest in. There was no motivation or reason to not be.
So go back to you're in college.
Okay.
You're finishing up.
Finance degree.
Did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Like, did you always knew you wanted to run your own business?
I'll tell you when I knew. My dad made me take calculus as a freshman. Don't let your dads do that, everyone. That's really hard. I took some upper level classes as a freshman at BYU, and that was hard. Engineering and calculus. When I got back from my mission, because I was going to be an engineer like my dad.
Following his lead.
When I got back from my mission, I wanted to be in business. A little bit because of what that mission president told me and how I saw that I was able to be effective in that role. So I went to my counselor at BYU and I said, here's what I got so far. What degree is the fastest way out of here? I don't care what it is. I literally don't care. What degree gets me out of here with the paper, because I wanted the paper, the fastest? She looked at what I had and she said, well, because of that math class, you would not have to take any of the business math. So go into the business department, get a finance degree, and I graduated from BYU in 7 semesters.
Wow.
Because I wanted out. Not out, I wanted to get going.
You wanted to get in the game.
And I wanted to get in the game, but I promised my parents I'd do it with that degree.
So you knew that you were going into
something,
into business.
Didn't know what the widget was.
And you had kind of a friend that you said the one job that you had was a construction job.
Yeah. So a lot of people will be familiar with this company. It's a great LDS-owned company in Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. Huge contractor. They did the Salt Lake Airport called Pete King Corporation. You may have heard of Pete King Corporation is the largest painting and drywall company probably in the Southwest. Huge contracts like the airport. And my neighbor was the owner, Jerry King, and one of my all-time heroes. He's passed away now, but just he's my hero. As a little kid, man, he taught me to work. He taught me the consequences of not doing something right. He was a tough guy. And he paid me my senior year at BYU to not accept another offer from a recruiter and just come back and work for him. So I went right back and worked for Pete King Corporation in estimating, doing takeoffs on big commercial projects. And then about 1 year later, my uncle, I probably should cover this because I'm technically not the founder. I get a lot of founder credentials, and I think I've earned them. But my uncle, in fact, this is really probably the best part of the story. My uncle lived in Las Vegas, and his wife wanted shutters, my Aunt Susan, and she wanted shutters. So Ron goes and looks, and shutters are way too expensive. He calls an interior designer. He's like, I'm not paying for that. I'll build them. Shutters are not easy to build. If you understand just the mechanics of those angles, if the louvers aren't cut perfectly square, not 1 degree out of square, they'll rub on the stiles and won't open. It's not an easy thing to build without automated equipment. He gets in his shop like Norm Abrams, This Old House, and builds these shutters for my aunt, and they're gorgeous. Then my parents want some, and he builds those. Pretty soon, he's got a garage, and he's building shutters part-time and selling pharmaceuticals for a real job, right? Fast forward to when I am just getting out of college, and he's got his own little shutter company in Phoenix, Arizona. But he's the salesman, he's the fabricator, and the installer most of the time. And, you didn't need a Harvard business degree to say, Ron, to be successful, we got to scale that. We got to be selling all the time. We got to be fabricating all the time. We got to be installing all the time. So we partnered up, And I put a business plan together. I'll never forget going over that business plan with him like I was in a class at BYU. And then we perfected that business plan, and we opened Sunburst Shutters offices. We started in Las Vegas with me and my wife. Then we did Dallas, Texas with an old roommate of Ron's. Then another friend of mine in Orlando and Tampa. My brother in Northern California, a dear friend in Phoenix, and just picked the markets that we knew were good for our product, and then I just blew it up and expanded it to where, you know, when we sold my portion, which is the factory and some of the main offices, we had probably 700 employees, and we're doing.
So it was like a full blown
it's a
organization.
And remember, each one of those is individual. So like this Sunburst Shutters office in Salt Lake does their own accounting and their own people, but they're part of this big organization, which turns out is really powerful because on a website or in a Google search, we look massive.
You've got a brand.
But you still get treated very individually and locally. So anyway, hats off to my uncle, who I still take to lunch every month at Cafe Rio in Las Vegas. He's suffering from some pretty serious dementia.
So talk to me about your uncle, because this is a really interesting story. And I think from like an entrepreneurial journey, like so many of these things kind of happen by accident. You just start down a road and then you like it emerges. For you, the opportunity was there's a product market fit that's kind of perfect. But there's also like major inefficiencies.
Yeah.
And it was you coming in saying, hey, you just keep making the product and I'll figure out how to go drive sales. And that was ultimately kind of where you guys ended in that relationship, right?
In fact, I think I told you when we were playing, I don't take any credit for the actual product, design, you know, features and benefits of what it does for the homeowner. Ron was the craftsman. Ron was the artist. I just saw the widget and saw plenty of demand and
kind of unlimited demand, right? Yeah. Like it was like never ending demand. No. It was more just
shutters have
function.
Never gone out of style. I'm sure many of your listeners have our custom shutters or someone else's in their home. They're timeless beauty. They're furniture on your windows. They're not shades or blinds.
Ooh, you're firing me up. I'm gonna go buy some shutters right now.
You don't have them already?
No,
let's go.
This is like.
I'll call Chelsea. You don't make those decisions.
The sales pitch is coming out. But there's a big gap between that and 40 years later selling the business. So like, talk to me about the evolution of the business. What was your vision when you got started? You said, hey, move to Vegas and we'll be here for 5 years.
I'd love to tell you that I had that plan, and I'm sure this rings a bell for you as you've interviewed so many clients in your own experience. Some of it was a plan, and you have to have a plan, I think, in the beginning, but then the plan can kind of get blown up and change, right? So we're doing this for a while, and all shutters are made out of wood. Just take wood from a mill the louvers and stiles and rails, assemble it, build it, sell it, right? It's all made out of wood 40 years ago. The inefficiencies of wood as a fabricator are endless.
Yeah.
The yield on the lumber you buy to what goes out in the finished product is probably 25%.
Very inefficient.
So you're watching this dumpster full of this expensive wood getting thrown away because it had a knot or a crack or it wasn't straight. You're like, this is not the way to do this. So Ron, again, some credit to him, but together we decided, look, this is not the best material to build this shutter out of. So we had the guts as a little shutter company in Phoenix, Arizona, to fly to Stuttgart, Germany for a trade show. And I'll never forget, we went to this trade show because Europe was doing things with materials that the U.S. wasn't doing. We were still just cutting down trees and making everything out of wood. Europe was way ahead of us because of the lack of those trees probably and supply to use synthetic materials. And we found a company building windows out of PVC, which now today, you know, I can't imagine what percentage of all windows are built out of PVC. But PVC wouldn't work for shutters because it's hollow, right? Like pipe in your yard. It's cheap. Nobody wants to buy PVC shutters.
Of course.
Believe it or not, the PVC resin is a very, very flexible, it's a resin that can be used in thousands of different ways. And a company in Europe had started extruding this resin in a solid form. It's called foam PVC. So if you just think of the pipe in your yard that carries water, well, what if it was solid, like a broomstick?
Of course.
It's no big deal. They just weren't making it for that reason. They were making it for like trim and moldings because they needed the cut ends to be solid. Trying not to get too technical. We saw that as, wait a minute, every single linear inch is perfect. It's an extrusion. There's no defects. There's no bad pieces. So we started making our shutters out of wood stiles and rails, the framework, and the louvers themselves were made out of this PVC
But that was
resin.
like a major innovation, right?
Major.
Like this was like kind of a game-changing.
Absolute game changer. The other part of that game-changing philosophy was branding. So we started using this synthetic material, and I'm being honest with you, you can't tell they're not wood. And in fact, that's one of our taglines. You can't tell they're not wood. Because people want the quality of wood, but they don't want the headaches.
Yeah.
So we trade named it Polywood, Pollywood, and got a nice logo. And now the Polywood shutter is the #1 selling shutter in the country through Lowe's, through Home Depot, through direct sales and everything else. But Polywood, that brand, is what was really valuable now as I look back to this buyer, this big company that bought us, because we built a shutter.
So you guys had the IP on it, you had the trademarks, you had everything.
We had everything. First to market is probably even more important than those things, right? Because you build momentum. But I really look back on that as being something really special to me, that we were not going to just sit back and build shutters like everybody else builds them.
Of course.
And this shutter changed the game. Since you love numbers, I'll just be real easy. If a shutter costs $10 a square foot in cost of goods sold, just direct material, direct labor, it's maybe $8 in labor and $2 in wood.
Yep.
You got to sand it. You got to make sure it's labor intensive. Polywood flips the equation. Same equation, $10, $8 in material, $2 in labor.
Wow.
You know what that means.
So the quality is just like over the top.
And I hate to say it, but the number of people required in the shop that have to be on time and do their job right was a fraction.
But that's the magic of like technology and innovation. You know what I mean?
We tried to keep that a secret for so many years because everyone else was still building out of wood.
You can't build they can't build a business that functions or they make any money.
So you look at the equation and you say, Dix, you didn't really accomplish anything. The shutter still cost $10. The difference in a product being material intensive instead of labor intensive is a game changer in a factory setting.
Yeah.
Because I can put out the same output, same throughput with 20% of the labor force.
Well, and like the consistency of quality and the
we didn't
like
even look at quality anymore.
The degree.
There was no QC. There was no sanding. There was no checking.
Wow.
Every piece was perfect.
So when did this happen in the journey? Like this was, obviously 40 years is like a
1991.
Okay, so, and you got started when?
88.
Okay, so it was early.
Yeah.
It was so that was kind of what kickstarted that. That
had it not gone that way, I would have never stayed. It wouldn't have been interesting enough.
Yeah.
Just selling wood shutters with the other wood shutter salesmen in Las Vegas with my wife. We would have made a good living, but would have never become anything without this innovation of this raw material change.
Yeah. Talk to me about the hard times. I think everybody looks at like the outcome.
Yeah.
And this is probably one of the most consistent things that I've seen is it's very easy to look at the outcome and assume that the road was linear.
Yeah.
Or assume that the road was, I don't want to say easy, but it was up and to the right. Talk to me about like the times it didn't work or the mistakes that you made.
So I think I'm lucky to be able to report that we didn't really have hard times in the actual business itself, like product failures. The dust from this material causes cancer and we got sued we had none of those kinds of problems. We really don't have customer or product related problems. We have economy related problems. And that's when I learned what it really means to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Because in 2007 is probably the best example, where 2004, 5, and 6 are great years. And then our business goes as the housing.
You were booming.
Yeah.
Like you were really
opening
clipping.
offices as fast as we could, borrowing money to do so. Obviously, that's the only access to capital we had.
Yep.
And then of course that was a tough 8, 9, and 10 were brutal. I don't think my wife and I took income for 3 years.
Yeah.
We over the course of the 37 years, we have paid off our primary residence at least 5 times, and then
I think that
remortgaged it to keep the thing moving.
That was something that you told me that I was like, that's what you sign up for as an entrepreneur.
And I don't think a lot of your partners or affiliates and my Sunburst team even knows that those things happen. Yeah. They just know shutters got to their office.
100%.
They never didn't get their shutters for their division.
But it's you guys literally like putting your house on the line, not one time, but like 5 times.
Multiple. One time, during that stretch, 7, 8, and 9, mortgaging everything we had to whatever anyone would loan, which was tough all by itself, and then personal loans from people that trusted me. Wow. That's where the trust factor comes in.
It got that dire.
I borrowed $800,000 from a golf buddy on my handshake and paid it back with interest. And
you just said this needs to happen.
I just knew the business was so good that we couldn't be taken down by this.
Yeah, you just weren't
situation.
You weren't willing to let it fail. Right. Yeah,
businesses fail for the right reasons. That's the wrong reason.
How did you and your wife manage through that journey? Because I think this is actually like that relationship.
Yeah,
matters so much to the success. If you're married, and you decide to be an entrepreneur, I'm referencing. I did one of these with David Neilman.
Yeah,
and he's the founder of Breeze Airways, but also he's done 4 other airlines. And I asked him the same question. I said, hey, what would you say to an entrepreneur, that's just getting started? And his answer was really interesting. He said, first of all, I'd just say it's not for everybody. And like, if you don't go to bed obsessing about it and wake up thinking about it, and it's all day, every day, you're probably not going to succeed. Because it's that level of drive and determination that's going to get you through the hard times. And if you have like a lack of that commitment, there's going to be a lot of points in the journey where you're going to quit. Talk to me about how you and your wife saw the business. Because when you're going and putting a mortgage on your house, that's not a personal decision. That's
she has to sign.
That's a family decision.
Can't hide that one.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thanks for teeing up the question that even would involve my wife, because I would be remiss if I didn't just say that I'm the happiest married guy My wife is just the greatest. She's a hardworking girl from Cheyenne, Wyoming, that grew up with a dad that kind of left their family when she was 11, and mom, my mother-in-law. I always tell people, if my mom knew how much I loved my mother-in-law, there'd be a little bit of a tension fight, because my mother-in-law is the greatest woman I've ever met.
You love her.
She raised those 5 kids on her own.
Wow.
My wife being the third girl. I met her at BYU at a dance at the old women's gym. By the way, not a gym for old women, a old gym for women. I had to clarify that with my roommates before I went to a dance at the old women's gym. And we met and we dated and we got married. And what do you know after ours wasn't that quick. Ours was about 1.5 years. As Provo goes, it was long.
Yep.
But you just still don't know that much. I hit the lottery. She's just the most amazing partner and teammate, greatest mom ever. And to do all the business things we've done, and even the failures when we made money in our business and then lost it trying to do something else.
Yeah.
There's a story there too, right?
Yeah.
She never once has looked at me with a disappointed look or, giving me that look of, why'd you do that? She has been 110% supportive of the journey. I think that's because she trusted me and she saw talent like my mission president saw.
She always believed in you.
Yeah, for sure, and still does. So we celebrate either 37 or 38 years in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure which one. I'll check my math after the podcast. But she's just the greatest. I love her more today than I did 30 years ago. She's just amazing.
But when you're like, so we talked specifically about a transaction that would have been life-changing. You kind of built this business for 15 years, 20 years. Some friends of ours were buying the business, Andy Dent, Rick Durham, and kind of we're deep down the road.
Right. We were basically ready to close.
Ready to close. And this is 2007.
Yeah, the spring of 2007. Right. Probably not much closed that spring at all.
No, and my personal experience was,
Oh, that's right.
Honestly, it was the rise of the Phoenix for me. That was rock bottom that ended up being what made me, But I think about that, and you had a very interesting experience. I think this is a telling experience about Andy and Rick.
Yeah.
But also telling experience about you. You were down the road in that transaction, and kind of at the 11th hour, it didn't work out. Yeah. Talk to me about that and how you dealt with it in the moment, and 2, it's 15 years later, and you're dear friends with both of them.
Yeah.
So obviously it was a high trust, great communication breakup, if you will, a disappointment.
Well, first, I think it says a lot about them. I think I was somewhat neutral in that. I was grateful for them. They were honest with me. They were honest that at that time the debt markets were just pulling out of deals like that. And private equity doesn't really work without that lever, right?
Of course.
So I remember the phone call. It couldn't have been nicer about it. We love your business. We think you're the right kind of business for us, but right now deals are off. As you mentioned, we've remained good friends. I have so much respect for those guys. They're brilliant. First of all, you know them. Their whole group. They're brilliant businessmen. But they're good guys. And I wanted to be around guys like that. Stayed in touch. I played in a member guest with Rick at one of his clubs, and Andy and I have, Christmas cards still come, and Jason Reading, one of the other principals there. It didn't end up happening, but we were going to get him to come to Las Vegas and do a youth conference. He does an amazing. He served in Afghanistan. He does an amazing Armor of God youth conference thing. They're just the greatest guys, and I'm so glad that we're still friends today. They were one of the first people I texted when Clear Lake announced the purchase of our company.
Were they so happy for you?
I sent the link to them. And of course, I got lots of praise.
They're just so excited.
And it was obviously for a lot more money than I would have sold to them for. But that's the story, right? That's the way it works.
But once that thing didn't go through, it got really hard.
Oh man. Just thinking back in those days, just how much time I spent at work. And I'm the kind of dad, I coached every little league team or sports team any of my kids were on. I never missed any event any of my kids did, which is the beauty of being an entrepreneur. It's lots and lots of time, but it is at least time you get to schedule. I never punched a clock. So my office would know I'd put in the kids' schedules in the week, and those times were not available. But during that time, I was locked in at work, just trying to move the chess pieces a little bit and satisfy suppliers.
Of course.
Can't tell you how many times I got on a plane on a red eye and flew to a supplier's business. I felt like being in front of them and making sure we paid something all the time, every month. We weren't quiet about it. They all worked with me. Banks worked with me.
Never gave up on you.
No, and I think there's a lesson there. You can't just ignore them. You got to go sit down and tell them I'm going to be back. And those relationships still exist too. So, I don't know that I learned that. Frankly, that was just a necessity.
Out of desperation.
Right. What else am I going to do? Can't hide from it.
But how long was it dark? How
3
long
years.
was it really, really hard?
2007, when our deal with Aries fell apart, it was dark, getting dark, and 8, 9, and 10 were dark.
Because no one was
We
building
follow
homes.
housing, obviously. We're a window covering in a new home. New home is 80% of our sales. Existing homes is 20%, and it just shut off. I mean, there wasn't a hammer swing. You know the stories, right? Las Vegas, where we're based, and our largest market was the hardest to fall in that entire foreclosure mess. So you didn't hear a hammer swinging in Las Vegas for 3 years.
How heavy is that?
It was hard, Case.
Was there ever a point where you're like, it's not going to work?
I met with a bankruptcy attorney, a guy I taught seminary with. I felt like I needed to get out in front of this for my family and see if I was a candidate for that. He was great. He was honest and said, I don't think you are. I think you can do this. I'm like, okay, then let's get after it.
Because you told me, obviously charitable giving and contribution to the community has been something that's been part of your family's ethos forever. You guys have always been very generous. And something you shared with me was there was 2 or 3 years where you're not taking a salary. You're not there's no giving. There's no anything. It was literally surviving.
Right. That was hard too, not to be able to do those things that we get in the habit of doing that are just
been a part
good
of
things.
you,
And to my wife's credit, she made sure that when we got healthy again, she made up for lost time.
She just got right back at it.
And not just back at it, but reset what she feels like we missed.
Me and my wife, we got married, I think it was 2004, 2005. And
see, you don't remember
it was a dark time in my father-in-law's business.
Okay.
He owned a mechanic shop. And I remember we're kind of marching towards getting married. And his business is losing money every month. And I remember we kind of held they had a nice home, had lived a really solid life, but their business is struggling. And I'm naive, don't get any of this stuff. And I remember they had an old memorable, I think it was a Babe Ruth baseball that they went and they sold this thing to pay for the wedding. And we're doing it in their backyard. And you think
what a
back,
great story.
you think back about these guys and you're just like, man, that's a heavy, it's heavy to carry, you know. And I think about that time with you and you got these kids and you're trying, and you got these employees.
That was the hardest
and
part.
You got 700 employees. And I just think those are the things that everybody loves, the good times. You know, it's fun when it's good.
Yep.
But when it gets hard, it's really hard.
I remember at family home evening, gathering kids around. The twins were just babies, but the oldest daughter and son, Jessica and Price, were, middle school age. Yeah, 2007. Yeah, middle school. Jessica might have been started high school. And we had to tell them, look, things are going to change here at home. And there's a new program for spending money and this and that. And we kind of laid out. I was pretty honest with him, and I'll never forget Price, at maybe 12 years old, said, Dad, is the Relief Society going to be bringing dinner over? I said, no. Maybe, but not every day.
Not yet.
We're not quite there yet. But they realized, as a family, we realized this was a serious
I remember
time.
my wife, she, they would always go on vacation and they would do different things. And then there was a period kind of through high school where it just all stopped.
Yeah.
And it just said, we just can't spend. And I think, like, as a kid, you don't get it.
Right.
You don't fully get it. I remember doing doing one of these with Nick Greer. Do you know Nick?
I know the name. Why?
He's
Help me with
CEO of Built Bar. He's
that's why.
kind of an incredible human.
That's why the Built
But
Bar,
he was talking about this experience in Arizona, being a 13, 14-year-old kid, and it's Thanksgiving, and his dad is selling, like, fire systems door to door on Thanksgiving for them to have, like, cash. And he experienced, like, affluency when they were younger. Like,
right.
it was kind of, his dad was a real successful entrepreneur, and then when it crashed really hard. And to this day, like, the scar tissue, the preparations that he makes, like, even like how he saves, are influenced from that experience. And I think,
I think those times changed. People my age changed their value of money, their planning. They probably became a little more conservative, but much more careful. I mean, it was about, Wall Street, those are the smartest guys in finance, right? And they went down like
the world imploded.
Just unbelievable. Each day.
Anybody that didn't live in that, it's tough to describe how intense it was. I remember me and my wife were building a house. 24 years old. I'd had, like, some success. And this will tell you a little bit about me. Like, I'm not building like a $200,000 house. We're building $1 million house, because if you build $1 million house, it's worth $1.3 million when you finish, because that's how real estate works. In 2006, the appreciation was just going crazy. The people in my life, and until the music stopped. And I remember we're in this house, the crash happens, and I'm underwater, hundreds of thousands of dollars in this house, where we can't get long-term financing, because, like, we have negative equity in this house.
Yeah.
And at the same time, my business that I was so excited about goes bankrupt. So now I don't have an income. So I'm in this $1 million house, and I'm driving a Range Rover, and my business implodes, and I've got $100,000 left. And my boss asks for a loan, and I give it to him, and he steals it. And I'm literally, like, laying in my bed, staring at the wall, like, can't sleep all night. And I'm like, how did I get us into this situation? Like, how am I going to get myself out? And I still, like, those refiner's fires are what make you. Like, I look back and I'm so grateful for the hard, but I never would wish it on my worst enemy. But it made me, like.
You said something there really powerful. You might not have even realized it. You said, how did I get us? You're a young married guy. It's a whole different feeling, isn't it? If it's you bounce. When you have a wife and kids, like I had in that time, I had all 4 of our kids at that time, and the twins were little, and that feeling of how did I get us in this mess
Yeah.
is and it can work both ways. You could just implode and give up, or you can get real fast, real tough, real
Yeah.
fast, right?
You wonder kind of why things work the way they work. But we didn't have kids at the time.
But I know the feeling of your wife, right?
Back about not having kids, and that was a real blessing to
Oh,
not
yeah,
have
that
kids,
time.
because the work for the next 3 years was a desperation hustle.
Right,
It was 70 hours a week nonstop for 3 years to go like get ahead.
right.
And it was just a sacrifice that if I would have had kids and,
Right.
I don't know, like it scared, like it was okay. Me and my wife were willing to make that sacrifice, and
Right.
we had kids along the way. So you get through that. And then all of a sudden there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I think this is a good lesson. Tony Robbins is like my favorite guy. And he talks about the seasons of business. And he talks about the spring when you're starting and everything's so exciting. And the summer when you're in the work and you're planting and you're moving pipe. And then you've got the fall that's the harvest. And it's just like really good. You're reaping the benefit of the work that you put in. And then there's the winter. And the winter can either be really comfortable or really uncomfortable based off of how you treated the rest of the seasons.
Right.
And I think about that. And, for you were in a dark winter those 3 years. But then the spring kind of emerges and there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Like, how did you take it from we're coming out of I'm meeting with bankruptcy attorneys to I go have a, wildly successful outcome for me and the people that I care about?
Yeah, it's just thinking back on that journey is pretty nostalgic. But the keys were that you stay the course. You don't change your principles. You don't change who you are. You got to be comfortable with who you are. You have to have confidence that you can do it. Like, I never once got up and looked in the mirror and like, you're never going to get there.
You always believed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And your wife always believed in you? She just
believed
knew.
in me.
She just knew.
She believed in me. And so you just stay at it. In our business, we're not a business that flips up and down like tech, right?
But where do you get that belief? Is it just you earn it? Is it just you've had other experiences in life where things got hard and you go work and you kind of follow these principles, and so you got that confidence that process works? Is it intuitive? Did you just always believe in yourself?
I think there's I'm not sure if my answer's, it could probably even offend some people, but similar to my adage that salesmen are born, they're not made. In my business, I didn't go find a really hardworking, honest, driven individual and turn them into a salesman. I believe that knack for gathering people around you, influencing, and basically convincing is innate, and to some degree. That a salesman is born.
Yeah.
And you just got to find them.
Yeah.
Then you got to train them, and sometimes you got to get some parameters built around them because they can be a little wild.
That was your focus. It's just finding somebody that had the raw skills.
I remember thinking if I filed bankruptcy, I was not nervous about losing the business because I could sell cars.
I cannot tell you, like, if there's what you're describing right there has been the most life-changing thing for me over my career. And it was when I was 22 years old, I was literally scared because I didn't have any skills. So I had nothing that the market would pay me.
You didn't think you had any skills.
They were definitely not developed. And so and I didn't know what I was going to go do. You know what I mean? I'd had a good mission. Was always successful in kind of what I'd put my mind to.
Right.
But I remember I went out and sold my first summer. And one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But I remember when I got to the end of that summer, I was driving home and the pride. And I remember having this distinct thought in my head that just said, if things ever get bad, I can go work for 4 months and make $50K.
Right.
And when things really got bad, I put on my hard hat and I went and I made $650,000 in 2007 when the world was imploding because I knew how to sell, I knew how to gather people, I knew how to lead people, and those skill sets in the market that I was in was worth $650,000 to a company. And that when you're saying like I never had fear, I've never had fear
Right.
that I can go take care of our family. And it boils down to that ability to go get revenue. I know that I can go sell.
That's exactly right. And you know, the fear thing is debilitating.
Of course.
I was nervous and I was worried, but I was not afraid.
You weren't scared.
Not one bit.
Yeah.
It'd just be a different widget. I'd find out what was selling because shutters weren't. And I'd go sell that.
Honestly, that fires me up so much. And it's like it's a lesson for young entrepreneurs that like it's hard to overemphasize
Right.
how important that skill set. I talk about this all the time. I teach up at BYU. And it's funny because like sales have different
My
connotations.
kid's taking your class next semester.
Oh, it's going to be so fun. But sales has different connotations to different people. You know, some people look at it as like a 4-letter word.
Right.
And for me, I'm like, because of my life experience and the companies that we invest in, if you've got somebody leading that company that can go get revenue, sales cures a multitude of sins.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mistakes that a company can make that if you have revenue, you can work your way through those mistakes. And the opposite's true. If you can't get revenue, it doesn't matter how good you are at operating. Right. Like you're going to be in trouble. But I think the last one that's underappreciated is what you're describing. And it's the confidence or the certainty, the belief that I know that I can go take care of things. If it's not this, it's something else. And I think that's so empowering. It's like, man.
And it was interesting. It wasn't arrogance or cockiness or, you know, it was just confidence.
It was certainty. It was knowledge.
I know I can do
it was
this.
knowledge, which is like so much more powerful.
I can't imagine the feeling if you were, I don't know, if there was a specific trade and you were just so good at this trade but not good at anything else in that market or that fell apart. That's a whole different,
whole different story.
Kind of
Whole different
fear.
story. Yeah.
Never any, I like that you said that. I hadn't thought about it that way. No fear.
Yeah.
Worry, concern, nervous, no fear.
So you just went to work. You just went and
I laid off salesmen and I went back out on the street.
Up and to the right. You go build your business. When was it the point where you said, I'm gonna sell my baby? I'm gonna sell something that I've spent. So I'll give you
lead me.
I'll give you a frame of reference. Okay. So I go to Harvard and I do this course on launching new ventures.
Okay.
And the professor's a guy named Jim Sharp. And Harvard MBA, goes and works for Jack Welch at GE.
Okay.
Gets some really great kind of operational experience. Works there for 5 years. And his 5th year, he comes up for a promotion. And Jack Welch kind of talks to him. He'd done everything, that you could do. And Jack Welch hires somebody from the outside to go take that role. And so he realized, I want to go do something on my own. And so he goes and he, does kind of a search fund, which was before its time, buys a small, is it kind of intruder? Okay. What did you just call what's the language on how you make your shutters? The extruder is
extruder.
Yeah, extruder. Yeah, he buys like an extrusion company, like a little manufacturing company, and he goes and runs that thing for 25 years. And then ultimately he sells it. And that's his story. So there's a bunch of different stories in this. And he phrases this question that was so profound. It's the thing that I remember from that course. And he asked the question, he said, do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? And he said that there are two very, very different journeys.
Yeah.
And the one journey is, I'm going to go own something 100%, and I'm going to be the king of my kingdom. And if I want to take some money out of the account to go pay for a vacation, I do it. And if I want to take some time off, I do it. And if I want to coach my kids' ball games, I do it because I'm the king of my kingdom. This is my company. And then there's the rich, which is, probably what people see as more of a traditional path for growing a company, which is you go raise some venture capital, then you get it to a point, and then you go raise some growth equity, and you keep raising all along the way. But that's not your company anymore.
No.
The second you start taking that outside capital, you are working for somebody, and you get on this treadmill that a lot of people don't realize that they even got on it, and it's taking them somewhere. So how do you balance the two from like, I can basically, if I want to go give a big donation to charity, I can do it out of the company. If I want to go, this is my kingdom and this has been our whole life, to I'm going to go work for somebody.
Yeah.
Like, how do you, one, make that decision? Was it a hard decision, or was it just time?
I think it was time. First of all, I'm 60, which sounds really old, and I don't feel old. I feel like my energy, my health is still great. I wasn't afraid of running our business for 10 more years.
Yeah.
But I think the answer to your question actually is a little bit of a family question. So this business was built, and two of my boys worked. Well, all four of the kids worked in the business to some degree, even if it was just down helping, right?
Yep.
But my older son, Price, the volleyball player from BYU, was in the business, and he ran the Utah store for a little while after he came back he played volleyball professionally in France, and when COVID hit, we got him out of France, barely. That's a whole story, like by a day.
Wow.
Or he's locked there for 6 months, and he comes here and he runs the Sunburst Shutters office in Utah for my partner and I. And he just doesn't love it.
His heart's not in it.
I think his heart was in it. He's just wired differently. He's smarter than I am. He's getting ready to apply for MBA school, and he's going to do some fun things. But he just didn't like the stress of the fulfillment to the customer.
Yeah.
That's a stressful thing if you're not prepared for it. It's the customer's expectation, getting them on time. Are the shutters going to be on time? And it stressed him out, and I could see that stress. And he pulled me aside, and we took a walk up at Sundance, just father-son walk, and we've always been really close. And I think he thought he was disappointing me. Dad, I just don't know if this is for me. Up until that point, I was thinking this would be a good legacy business. I could remain the owner, somewhat,
but pass it on to your kids.
Price could take over, then, maybe other kids would get involved. When Price bowed out, then I immediately, like the next day, made the conscious decision in a discussion with my wife. It's not a family business really anymore. Let's put something together that has an exit, because that's the best thing also for the company and for the employees, because I felt like we'd taken it about as far as you could take it. So I got to work. And to your credit, we were talking a lot about planning. You're a good planner. And I made a plan to circle the wagons somewhat. I divested myself of some of the Sunburst equity in some of the other offices with my partners that are great friends to this day, some of my best friends. And so they owned their Sunburst Shutters divisions. And I just took the ones that I owned and the factory and the trademarks and names, which have a lot more value than I think people think. I didn't know, I had no idea the value of the
brand.
The brand.
Yep, the brand.
Right? So I hired a great investment banker. Hats off to, shout out, John Waldock with Eide Bailey. He works out of Park City, so there's a plug. He's the greatest. He came, we met him through a mutual friend, a tax friend of mine in Vegas that was with Eide Bailey, and John showed me how we wrap this thing into a nice package, all accurate data, but we really can get it out to the market to see where the interest was. I had no idea people would be interested in my business. I thought I'd have to go find someone. Hey, are you interested in my business? Well, now you're leaking oil, right?
Yeah.
He goes out to the market and says, there's this great business. And he dressed it up appropriately.
Yeah.
And we had all kinds of interest from private equity.
So the process was game on. There was tremendous.
In 3 months, we had 50 interest levels, 10 non-disclosure agreements, and 4 rough offers from private equity. And we had manager meetings with those private equity firms, and I'm ready to go. Like, those numbers looked okay. They looked good to me. And at the 11th hour, again, I don't know, just lucky, blessed, whatever you believe in. At the 11th hour, one of only 2 strategic companies in our space, there's only 2, Hunter Douglas, which is a huge European company owned by 3G. They're billions and tens of billions. And another big company in the U.S. based in Madison, Wisconsin, called Springs Window Fashions. And Springs is owned by Clear Lake, a very sophisticated private equity fund out of Santa Monica. And in the 11th hour, before we were about to go LOI with the best of those private equity offers, Springs comes in with an offer. And you know, you're in private equity. Strategic buyers see a whole different landscape.
They can pay more.
They're paying for the name, for the reputation, for the synergies that we have as a business. The CEO of Springs at the time said to me in the management meeting, because they are very good at every other window covering, blind, shade, roller shades, soft window coverings, curtains, drapes. They're good at all those window coverings. They're not very good at shutters. And he said in this management meeting, the phrase, he said, shutters are kind of the bane of my existence. I'll never forget that phrase. And I'm like, whoa, this is going to be a great
real problem for him.
Because we're just going to plug in.
Yep, and if he can solve this is going to
So 2 things about that. The plug-in is never as easy as it sounds.
Of course.
I'm here with you a year later. The plug-in is clumsy. It's hard.
Yep.
They're a $2-3 billion company, and the plug-in and integration is
hard.
very difficult.
Yep.
But the number they're willing to pay is significantly better than private equity. I think that must just be, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea. The strategic buyer was what I needed. And it came in the 11th hour, and we closed 5 months later, and I work for them now.
Yeah.
Had to get PTO to go play golf with you the other day because, I only get so many days a year now.
I remember.
Never called in for PTO in my whole life.
Same thing. I'm at HBS. There's a guy who sold his company, and he is telling this story. He took, I think it was $3 or $4 million off the table, pretty young. And then after he sells the company, you're so much autonomy, make every decision, just guns blazing. And he goes, sits down with the HR person, and they spell out his days off and their policy and this. And literally he turned in his resignation the next day, and he just said, I can't do this. I'm not built for this, you know? And so it was funny when we were talking, just me knowing you now, how funny it is that you have an employer. It's just.
And by the way, he's a great guy. Yeah. So I think I'm going to stick it out. I have a contract over a period of years. Yeah. I'm mostly still emotionally all dialed in because of the people in my organization that's meaningful.
Yeah, you love the people.
I'm not going to run out on them, but they're not going to need me too much longer. I'll do what I can. The integration's coming along. It's a great synergy of our 2 businesses in a tough economy.
No, it's a beautiful story. It's a really beautiful story. So I've got a couple questions before we finish up.
Okay.
If you were to go back, and you're doing this with your kids now, but if you were to go back and talk to yourself, talk to Dix Jarman when you're 22 years old, 25 years old, what advice would you give yourself to help the journey go more smoothly? What would you sit down?
You saw me smile because this answer's on the, I don't have to think about this answer. This little shutter business has been so good to me. And the only mistakes I've made are taking the money I've made in my core business and then investing it in things I wasn't educated about, or I didn't get good advice about, or I didn't do the proper due diligence like your team does. Yeah. And I lost. I'm the worst investor you've ever met outside of my own business, because I think I didn't realize, because I'm good at this and I'm successful at this, that doesn't qualify me one bit
good at
in the private world of investment. And so the lesson at 22 would have been, hey, just run your business, do what you know how to do, invest it wisely in the markets or things that are secure that you don't have to make decisions on, and quit trying to hit a second home run.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time talking about our kids and our family and faith.
Yeah.
Talk to me about faith and how that's kind of influenced decisions along the way, both as being a dad, both as, how to lead your company, and ultimately how you give.
I have no idea if this is what you want me to say, but it's honest. My family is everything to me. I'm not sure you've had a guest. I've listened to a lot of your guests. Most are consistent with that. My family is everything. I've told you how wonderful my wife is. We had this traditional vision of our family, right? Based on the gospel. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We're faithful members. I've been in a stake presidency. I teach seminary now. My faith is very important to me.
Yeah.
What I've learned over the last 10 years is that my faith is my faith. And it's not a plug and play for everyone else. We have 4 children. We are a close family. I'm so grateful how close we are. My oldest daughter and son-in-law are 2 of the most incredible people. They're the ones that own the pizza yard in Midway that we talked about, and have my 2 little granddaughters. So they can do no wrong because they have produced the 2 grandchildren that we have. But they're not necessarily active in the church right now. Their principles, their honesty, their integrity are unmatched. I could not be more proud of them.
Yeah.
But we aren't going to the temple together, as a family.
Yep.
Because that's just not where we're at right now. Price, my son, that's the All-American from BYU, is not active in the church right now. He's the finest young man I know, and one of my best friends. And luckily, he's taken up golf. I think you're going to play with us soon. He's the greatest kid. I could not be more proud of who he is. But it's not the model that I picked, right?
Yeah.
Then we have twins 8 years later. You and I have talked about this. We have some similar things, but we couldn't have any more kids, and we wanted more kids. So we have twins 8 years after Price through in vitro fertilization. I'm as grateful to Dr. Shear as I am my Father in heaven. He produced these 2 children for us. There's no other way to say it. He's a miracle worker. And we have these twins. Twins are an interesting thing, right? They have this, you can't say that your socioeconomic situation changed, right? Were you different with the oldest kid because you were dirt poor than you were with the youngest kid because you'd hit a home run?
Came at the same time.
They're the same program all day long, every day, every Cheerio at the same time. And I couldn't love them both any more than I do. Cooper is returned from his mission in South Africa, and like I said, is playing volleyball at BYU. And Riley, Cooper's twin, has transitioned and is now Riley, my daughter, and she's beautiful, and I love her. I love her with all my heart. And that's been a journey. That's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and say I love her and everything's hunky-dory. It's hard. It's hard because you see pain, because our society is not kind in general to the LGBTQ community. Well, guess what? I am now. I am. And my wife is. And the rest of everyone should be. There's no way you can tell me that was different parenting, right? Riley didn't get the same effort from dad that Cooper got, right? All these things that some people think. They got the exact same scenario every day, all day long. And that's our family now. And you know what? It's great. It's great. And if anything, Casey, my faith has grown from that, because what I've learned is we love, he saves. If there's a savior, he can do it all and do everything. And I don't have to worry about that. I just have to worry about loving, including, staying close to, and my wife and I have been able to do that. So it's not the picture we painted 37 years ago, but it's an unbelievable picture, and we love it.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about the same thing and going through, our family is very unique. We got different kids, and, our oldest daughter, Callie, would identify as non-binary. We've got 2 adopted kids that, are African-American. And
I met them.
You just
great.
have this view of like, hey, what's life going to be like?
Right.
And then you go have something that's so much better.
Right.
But we're growing in that. And I think where we connected and where you just realize, like, the longer you go, the more you just got to love. Yeah. Because like the boxes that you kind of grow up with that people are supposed to fit within just don't fit within those boxes.
But love is easy, right?
But love's super easy. You know what I mean? Easy. And it's actually like, that is the answer. And I feel that from you. Like I feel that towards me. Yeah. And, we don't know each other too well, but I feel, a tremendous amount of love and good vibes, and I can feel it towards your kids and your community. And I just think you're a beautiful soul. And this is the last thing that I'd say is, from spending time with you, I'm so excited to see what the third act of the play is. Because act 1 of building the business and act 2 of kind of growing and raising your family, I just feel like you have some significant dent to go make in the world. And it's going to be fun to see like what you do with all this free time that you've never had before. And so just know I'm kind of the biggest Dix Jarman fan. I'm cheering for all of your wins, and, think you have a beautiful family and think you've lived a beautiful life. And I'm grateful that, you're willing to go share this story, because I think it's a story that, there's a lot of young people that are starting that journey.
Yeah.
And so I think there's just wisdom that comes from learning from people that are 5, 10, 20 years down the road, down the path. So thank you, brother.
Hey, been great to be with you.